Hello and welcome to day 102. We have 1 Samuel chapter 13, 1 Chronicles chapters 2 to 3, and 2 Corinthians chapter 12. So there's 2 points that I would like to make here in 1 Samuel's reading today. First of all, Saul gets impatient and he didn't wait for his prophet. So when God agreed to let Israel have a king, God also pointed out that there would always be a prophet to go with the king. And so Samuel came first, the prophet, and eventually Samuel anointed the king Saul. Saul, and in this story, is impatient and he doesn't wait for Samuel to show up. Samuel told Saul and the people to stay focused on God, and already Saul is off doing stuff his own way. Seems like he was good. He was making offerings to God, but without God's prophet there and not following God's plan that came through God's prophet, Saul got in trouble. So, first of all, don't be impatient. Second of all, technology. We don't talk about this a whole lot. It's easy for us to think this is just ancient history and people just didn't have the stuff we have today. And while that is true, there were major technological advances that were being made through this time. And technology was just as important back then as it is to us today. So the Philistines, the people who lived along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, were in the Iron Age. They controlled blacksmiths and tool creation and maintenance. War with the Philistines meant that the Hebrews no longer had access to blacksmiths who could repair and sharpen their iron tools for farming. It also means the only people with iron military gear were Saul and his son Jonathan. So this is a little bit like the trade wars that we see in the world today. Military wars disrupt trade. Economic relations usually transcend national borders because natural resources are not distributed evenly throughout the world. And the skill sets and interests of different people in different countries are different. So just as today, different countries specialize in certain things, certain products, or certain countries have more resources in a certain area, there's a lot of economic trade that goes across borders. This was the same for the Hebrews and the Philistines. There were foods and materials that were available from along the sea that the Hebrews did not have, living in the hill country and living in the mountains. And then there was technology that the Philistines controlled, and that they were very careful that there were no blacksmiths in the Hebrew area where the Hebrews could take care of iron technology for themselves. So I think the second thing we have to think about from First Samuel reading today is that we have to share. Now, sharing is something that God talks about a lot. The whole idea of loving our neighbors, that's about sharing. Conflict disrupts relationships, even economics. So we need to continue to think about the teachings of Jesus as well as the teachings of God through the Hebrew Bible. Fear and anxiety drive wars, whether they are military wars or trade wars. Now, in First Chronicles, we continue our list of people, of genealogy, of ancestors. And remember, this is a way of helping people stay grounded in where their people came from. Now, I suggest we pay attention to the section on David's family because the names that we see there are going to come up in future readings because a number of his children get involved in wars of succession after his death. There's a lot of fighting among his sons, and some of them end up as kings themselves. In 2 Corinthians, we're coming up to the end of the letter. So Paul is trying to get in all of his final points before he wraps things up. Paul admits that he has a handicap, and he has prayed repeatedly for God to remove this because it is a weakness that slows him down. He never explains what it is. Some people think it's bad eyesight. We don't know what his problem was. But Paul used his handicap to learn to rely on God. Jesus gives him strength. He can't boast that he is accomplishing much because he knows that everything he's accomplished through the power of Jesus in his life. So Paul is planning to visit the Corinthians again. He doesn't want material support from them. He just wants their commitment to Jesus. Paul is worried about quarrels and jealousy, and he is really hoping that they don't emerge at his next visit. So my reflection for Paul's writing today is, are we tearing each other down? Do we get jealous of the success of other Christians or other churches? And do we rely on God for strength? I think we spend a lot of time comparing ourselves to other churches, other Christians. There's a lot of time arguing and quarreling and bickering over all sorts of small issues that have nothing to do with the core message of Jesus Christ. I think if we go to the Sermon on the Mount, and anytime we have an argument at church, I think we need to pull up the Sermon on the Mount and say, does this argument have anything to do with the issues that Jesus outlined as being critical to the ethics, the life choices of Christian believers? And then we either agree to disagree or we come up with a compromise that we can do both things in some way. But I think we have to seriously consider what Paul is writing to the Corinthians here about needing to reduce the quarreling and bickering and jealousy within families of believers. We'll see you next time.